I'm Gwen Hill at Pine Ridge Baptist Church Sunday School Department, Ladies Class, and today we're studying Exodus 32. We've been studying Exodus for several weeks, and today we're going to recognize that Moses is still on the mountain with God. God has given him all the directions for the tabernacle. He's given him all kinds of things for the 40 days that Moses has been up there. But now, God is getting ready to turn Moses loose to tackle the jobs that he's assigned him. But first, we're going to go behind the scenes. We're going to go to the base of the mountain and see what's been going on down there while Moses has been at the top. Remember, this is at a minimum 2.5 million people down at the base of that mountain. Aaron is there to lead them, along with 70 men that they have agreed that are wonderful, common sense men with good wisdom, and they've been managing while Moses has been gone. Moses has been gone 40 days. No telephones, telegraph, television, nothing like that. When Moses went into that cloud at the top of that mountain, he went out of their sight, and they have heard nothing from him for 40 days. In our day and time and in our culture, if we don't hear from someone after just a few minutes by text or by getting them to physically speak to us on a phone, we wonder what's wrong. Think about 40 days. As we cut to the bottom of the mountain to see what's going on, we are finding out that the people are very fearful. The physical picture of the deliverer from Egypt was Moses. Yes, they looked to Aaron too, but they had very much agreed Moses was the leader, and he's been out of sight, out of pocket for 40 days. That's a long time. It's a long time. Aaron has been trying to keep it together down there, but things are going awry. Exodus 32, chapter 32, verse 1. Now, when the people saw that Moses delayed coming down from the mountain, the people gathered together to Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us gods that shall go before us, so as this Moses, this man who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him." They're afraid. They have never been in this situation before. They are a people that have been told what to do, where to go, when to do it, and how to do it for 430 years. Now they're out in the middle of the desert, and they don't know how to be a nation yet, and they don't know how to be their own boss. They don't know how to pick leaders yet very well, and they're fearful. The man that was the face of God to them is gone, and in their thought process is probably not to return again. So they want to do something that's familiar. What is familiar to them is the gods that Egypt had. So in verse 2 and following, and Aaron said to them, "Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me." So all the men broke off the golden earrings which were in their ears, and they brought them to Aaron. Maybe Aaron thought this would buy him some time, that maybe these people would not want to give up their gold. Maybe he thought, if I delay them just a little bit, Moses will come down that mountain. I don't know. But that's not what happened. So all the people broke off the golden earrings that was in their ears, and they brought them to Aaron. Now, it sounded like in Scripture that there was going to be 2.5 million people who had, at least, that had earrings in their ears. And what he asked for was for those earrings. It's going to take a hot minute to collect all of them. When I used to read this, until this study started, when I was reading this, I would think of a bowl with a bunch of earrings in it. There would be several bowls. You're talking about 2.5 million people, and let's say only 2 million of them had the earrings. Some of them had more than 2 in their ears. Some had 1 in each ear. Somebody had maybe a lot more. Some had small, some had large. It's a pretty good haul of gold. And then in verse 4, when Aaron received the gold from their hand, he fashioned it with an engraving tool and made a molded calf. Then they said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." This sounds simple, but it wasn't. He had all of this gold. He had to melt it down, which means they had to have a hot enough fire to melt gold, a pot to hold it all in. It had to be melted, poured into a mold, cooled down, brought out of the mold, and then Aaron used a tool to work on it to fashion it into a more representative of something that they were very familiar with in Egypt, which was a idol that looked like a cow or a calf. But notice what he said in verse 4. He said, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." And he said it with an exclamation point. Do you hear some sarcasm behind it? I kind of think I do. Verse 5, so when Aaron saw it, the reaction of the people to the golden bull, he built an altar before it. And Aaron made a proclamation, and he said, "Tomorrow is a feast of the Lord." Okay, this verse gave me some problems for a while, and I've been studying on it quite a bit. And you're getting what I derived. Study it yourself. See what you think. Okay? If you'll notice, in different translations, in verse 5, they have Lord spelled with a capital L, O-R-D. Some translations has it capital L, capital O, capital R, capital D. Okay? When you use all caps in the Old Testament, you're saying the same thing as Yahweh or Jehovah. But Aaron, when he looks at this, in the New King James Version is what I'm studying with right now. He is still talking about Yahweh here. So what he's saying is something that we do often. Do you ever do anything and then ask God to bless it? What is the proper way that we're to do anything? You got a project going on, you got an anticipated project that you're going to start, an activity that you're going to start, a day that you're going to start, a trip that you're going to start. You ask God's blessing on it before, and you pay attention to his answer. Does he say go ahead, or does he say no, not that way? But what do we do more often? Make our plans, even go through with it, and then say, God bless that for me. We did this great work. Now bless it, Lord. That's not the proper way. It's not the proper way. But that's what Aaron's doing here. He's saying, all right, if you want something to represent God to you, and you want something you're familiar with, I'll give you that. Remember, they were told the 10 Commandments by God himself from the top of the mountain. And they know the most important ones is, thou shalt have no other gods before me They should have no graven image. But here they're making a graven image. And some of them are going to worship that instead of God himself. In other words, Moses is not here. And he represented God to us. So now we want an inanimate object that we can more thoroughly control to represent God. Strange. Then in verse 6, then they rose early the next day, and they offered burnt offerings, and they brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and to drink, and they rose up to play. Maybe Aaron is still delaying them just a little bit. He's saying, well, here is the calf. Let's build an altar, and tomorrow we will burn a sacrifice to this calf, and we will celebrate. Buying one more day, hoping that Moses comes down that mountain. But they're having a party, and they're going to offer burnt sacrifices. Remember, they haven't got the tabernacle yet that we've been studying about. Moses has got the plans, but the tabernacle is still in planned form. It has not been built yet. They do not have the 10 Commandments written in front of them, except maybe where Aaron, as a scribe, wrote them down when God was calling them out from the top of the mountain. I don't think I would have forgotten them if I'd heard God calling them down from the mountain, but nevertheless. So let's start with verse 7. Now the scene switches. We've been at the base of the mountain. We're going back to the top. Who's at the top? 3 personalities are at the top. We have God, we have Moses, and somewhere up there is Joshua. Joshua went up the mountain with Moses. We're not told where Joshua stayed. He could have been right beside Moses as Moses talked to God, as kind of like Moses' scribe, or he could have been on a slightly lower level than Moses was, waiting for Moses to finish with his conversation with God, and he would have been up there for 40 days as well, because in just a few minutes we're going to see Joshua back again. So I think of this as there arose such a clatter. They're at the top of the mountain. Moses doesn't hear anything from the valley floor below at the base of the mountain. Neither does Joshua. But God does. When I was a young girl, I used to think, God, it's just not fair for you to hear my thoughts. I ought to be able to manage my own thoughts. I should be able not to be held accountable for just thoughts that flip through my head. That doesn't sound fair to me. And then in a quiet, still moment, another thought came into my head. And it was as if God were asking me, does that mean you don't want me to listen to your silent prayers as well? When you talk to me in your head, do you not want me to listen? God listens all the time. And he heard them. From the top of the mountain, God heard them. Just as he hears me, just as he hears you every day. Guard your thoughts. Guard your mouth. Verse 7. And the Lord said to Moses, he's not happy. Get prepared. And the Lord said to Moses, go, get down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. They have turned aside quickly out of the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded calf and worshipped it and sacrificed to it and said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt. And the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and indeed it is a stiff-necked people. Now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may burn hot against them, and I may consume them, and I'll make you a great nation. Period. God God's mad. Ooh, he is furious. God is aware of everything that they did at the base of the mountain. He is aware that they demanded a God that they could see and touch and feel. He's aware that Aaron acquiesced to them. He's aware that that molten calf has been formed and that they are fixing to offer a sacrifice to that idol. He is aware that they have totally disregarded his 10 commandments. Only 10 simple things he asks of them. And he is angry. He is furious. He is to the point where he looks at Moses, and in a way this is a test for Moses. He said, I'll wipe them out and start all over with you. Moses, I'll make you an Abraham. I'll start all over with you. The same promise that I made to Abraham, I'll make to you. I'll make you a great nation. He's called them a stiff-necked people. Do you know what that means? It means prideful. It means that they won't bow to him. They won't obey him. They refuse to obey. They are a stubborn people. And oh my goodness. And Moses, do you see Moses getting pale? Do you see his eyes getting big? I don't know if he is sitting with his head bowed before the Lord, if he's lying on his stomach on the ground before the Lord. I don't know what kind of reverential stance his body is in, but do you see the distress in this man? Wait, Lord, wait. Moses is daring to try to reason with God. He's very, very brave and very humble. Listen in verse 11 and 12. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord his God, and he said, Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians speak and say, he brought them out to harm them, to kill them in the mountains, and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your fierce wrath and relent from this harm to your people. Moses says, oh God, I didn't bring them out of Egypt. You brought them out of Egypt. I didn't even want to go. You're the one. You brought them out. You know who they are. You know what they've gone through. It took us almost a year to get them out of Egypt. With great power and a mighty hand you brought them out. And he says, you know what's going to happen if you do away with all of them, if you go poof and they no longer exist. You know what's going to happen. All those people back in Egypt are going to say, hey, that's exactly what we said he'd do. You can't trust that God. He doesn't tell the truth. He doesn't keep his promises. He said, God, you've got to turn from your wrath, and you've got to change your mind for yourself, if not for these people. Moses continues in verse 13. He says, remember Abraham and Isaac and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self. And you said to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and all of this land that I have spoken of, I give to your descendants, that they may inherit it forever. Do you see God's wrath and his anger subsiding? Do you hear him listening to his servant Moses? Have you ever been stubborn to listen? I am. Verse 14, so the Lord relented from the harm which he said he would do to his people. I can almost feel Moses when the Lord's fury began to abate. Prepare to descend, to go down to the base of the mountain just to see what's going on. Verse 15 through 19. And Moses turned and he went down from the mountain, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in his hands. The tablets were written on both sides. On the one side and on the other they were written. Now the tablets were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God engraved on the tablets. Can you imagine that? Wonder how many times as he carried those tablets would a finger go over the engraving and think, that's God's own finger did that. Look at the way he wrote those letters. Perfectly, easily read. He's carrying that. Can you imagine how precious if he allowed himself to think that way? Verse 17, and then when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there's a noise of war in the camp. So he's coming down the mountain. Remember, Moses is like 81 years old, maybe 82 at this point. And Joshua's in his maybe 21, 22. But Moses, and hear the defeat in Moses' voice. Moses said, it's not the noise of the shout of victory, nor the noise of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing I hear. And so it was. As soon as he came near the camp and he saw the calf and the dancing, so Moses' anger became hot. And he cast the tablets out of his hand and he broke them at the foot of the mountain. I think in our day and time, had he had some sort of leather satchel in his hands, he would have cast it away just as showing his anger. But he happened to have those 2 tablets in his arms and he threw them down. The covenant was broken before it was even signed. And Moses became furious. He is seeing with his own eyes now what had made God so angry at the top of the mountain. While Moses at the top of the mountain really couldn't comprehend everything God was saying, now at the base of the mountain, when he looked over the people and he saw what was going on, he knew. He knew. He was hot with anger. You know, the people supposed that he was dead. And now they're seeing him walk down the mountain. Wonder what they thought. Verse 20 through 29. Then Moses took the calf which they had made. He burned it in a fire, and he ground it into powder, and he scattered it on the water, and he made the children of Israel drink it. This took a hot minute, literally a hot minute. He took that molten calf that Aaron had made, and he threw that thing down, and he's hit it with a hammer or a sledge, much like a mortise and pestle. He made it into smaller pieces that would melt easy. He put it back in that pot, and he melted it down. And then he ground it into pieces, and he sprinkled it over the water, and he made them come by and drink it. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you, that you have brought such a great sin upon them? Aaron is afraid of Moses and the God that Moses represents. And what do? When you've done wrong and somebody comes at you and says, why did you do that? I used to hate it when Mom asked me that or Dad asked me that. Why did you do that? Because I had to examine my own motives. In my growing up, there were so many times that I had the opportunity to do something that Mom or Dad had told me not to do, and I chose not to do it because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And sometimes I chose not to because I knew what the consequences consequences would be. And I knew what the consequences were from those times when I'd go ahead and do it anyway. But Moses is right in Aaron's face. And he says, what did these people threaten you with? What did they do to you to make you do this? You were my right hand. God chose you. You spoke to Pharaoh. You held the staff. You did all kinds of miracles in God's power. What would bring you to do this? And in verse 22, Aaron looked at him. He says, don't let the anger of my Lord, no capitals here, so he's talking to Moses as if Moses was his master. Okay? Do not let the anger of my Lord become hot. A little late for that. You know the people, that they are set on evil, blaming somebody else. Verse 23, for they said to me, make us gods that shall go before us. As for this Moses, this man who brought us out of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it in the fire, and this calf came out. A little case of liar, liar, pants on fire. Verse 25, now when Moses saw that the people were unrestrained, for Aaron had not restrained them, to their shame among their enemies, then Moses stood in the entrance of the camp, and he said, whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me. And all the sons of Levi gathered themselves together to him. The sons of Levi. Levi, the tribe of Levi, are known by their ancestral father Levi, that one of the sons of Jacob, as to being a violent person. Okay? They're not quite the calm, controlled men that you would think. They had a bent toward violence, but they made a choice. They did not know that at the top of the mountain, the Lord had decreed that the tribe of Levi would be the priest. They didn't know that. But Moses, when he saw that the people were not really repentant, when he saw that even grinding up that bull and making them drink the gold, that some of them were still in a rebellious mood, he went to his tent and shouted, anybody that wants to be on the Lord's side, come to me. And the sons of Levi, the men in the tribe of Levi, as a group, went to Moses. I like that. In verse 27, and Moses said to them, thus says the Lord God of Israel, let every man put his sword to his side and go in and out from entrance to entrance throughout the camp, and let every man kill his brother, every man his companion, every man his neighbor. So the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. 3,000 Israelites lost their lives that day. Now, who were these 3,000? They were 3,000 that refused to repent. They were the 3,000 that were ringleaders in convincing Aaron to make the idol. These were 3,000 men that were the ringleaders. Now go over to Acts and read how many people were saved and baptized and added to the church the very first day on Pentecost when Peter preached. The number's 3,000. Coincidental? I don't think so. Verse 29. Then Moses said, consecrate yourselves today to the Lord. He's talking to the Levites. That he may bestow on you a blessing this day, for every man has opposed his brother, his son, and his brother. That means You've done what God told you to do, even though it was painful for you. You have followed his directives. And now it came to pass, verse 30, now it came to pass on the next day that Moses said to the people, you have committed a great sin. So now I will go up to the Lord, and perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. Perhaps I can bring the Lord and us together again to make us one. Maybe I can do something that will put God in a position to look favorably on you. So Moses went up the mountain again in verse 31. Then Moses returned to the Lord, and he said, oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray, blot me out of your book which you have written. And the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot him out of my book. In verse 34. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin. So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made. When Moses was speaking to the Lord in verse 33, he said, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. God said that to Moses. Moses is saying, don't blot him out forever. Blot me out too. And what they're talking about is not people that have accepted Jesus Christ and have been written into the book of life. Jesus Christ has atoned for your blood. That is not the book. This is the book of life. Remember, Job said he wished he had never been born, to just wipe out all remembrance of him being born. That's what he's referring to here. The same kind of word, same kind of lineage. And Moses has said, well, don't leave me. If you blot them out, blot me out as well. Blot me out as well. God didn't want to do that. God had great big plans. But he had to get the stiff-necked people to understand how holy he was and who he was. And sometimes that means some dire things have to happen. We don't know in verse 35 what the plague was that he gave the people. We do know that he said he would punish them later. They would know what the punishment was for. But he would go ahead and plague them for what they had done with the calf that Aaron had made. Be careful. You know, anything that stands between you and God is an idol. So if you know that God would want you to do A, and you say, I'll do A, but only after I do B, B becomes an idol. God, I feel like I made a commitment to do this for you, but I need to go and do this first. You're saying that's more important. And God says, no. No, I will not bless it in that order. You have to do it the way I say. And he has the right to do that. Next week, we're on Exodus chapter 33. Our pastor this morning preached on 35. I was real thrilled with that. I wish we'd been further enough along that he could have shed some more light on our lesson for us. So I hope you have a good week. I'll see you next week. Goodbye.